Here we go. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The Emperor of Man, the Carrion Lord, for whom 1,000 souls died. Stars, universe, and whatever happens, you will not be missed. Warhammer 40k Primer.
Welcome to the first in my series of primers focused on the universe of Warhammer 40,000. If you're watching this, you may well be brand new to the all-encompassing hobby we call 40k. But what is it? What's it all about, and why should you consider looking into it any further? Well, for one reason, in recent times, people's appetites have been reawakened to highly immersive TV series like Game of Thrones or movie franchises with a decent backstory. 40k goes considerably far beyond these examples. It is one of the biggest miniature wargames in the world and features an ever-evolving story that expands in written text, video games, and of course its original and arguably most important feature, the miniatures and its tabletop game. It is created and owned by Games Workshop, a UK-based company producing tabletop games and associated materials. Now, I will cover elements of 40k as briefly as I can today, but I won't skimp on detail just for the sake of time. It's as to the point as I can make it, but if you want to know more about specifics, here on my channel I've covered in detail some of the core background areas of the game, which is continuing to expand. I'll also be continuing to produce these short primers to the world of 40k, and I'll also be continuing to make the longer form content which is featured regularly here on the channel.
Appreciate it.
Often referred to by those already consumed by Warhammer 40,000 as the hobby, 40k is not one thing to one person. It is a highly detailed narrative spanning multiple empires, from world-ending galactic campaigns to lowly individual soldier stories. It is a series of usually middle-of-the-road video games with a few standout gems. It's a hobby of addictive miniature painting and crafting, and it is a tabletop wargame now established for over 30 years. It has spawned a variety of smaller games designed to be played without acquiring a huge army, games like Space Hulk, Necromunda, and Kill Team, and these often require only say 6 to 10 pieces per side and are very accessible for new players, whereas standard Warhammer 40,000 tabletop may require larger armies with many pieces. Now, before we come to the lore, it is worth looking at the original tabletop game, as this will give you a better understanding of just everything about it. If you've never seen or encountered a tabletop game, this is not important, it's actually very simple. Usually 2 players will engage in a battle laid out on a table at your home or a gaming venue. The area of play will be set with terrain pieces, often crafted and painted by the players, and they will alternate turns moving their miniature soldiers or vehicles, and will resolve engagements through random dice rolls according to specific rules and combat.
So it's a lot like Dungeons and Dragons, except with very specific, because I guess I wasn't keen to the fact that it started as a tabletop game. I kind of got that from the Bricky videos, because he kept showing the armies in figurines, and I was like, oh, this must be big in the whole figurine area community. Community, that's a good name for it. But yes, that's interesting to know, and I'm sure that it definitely impacts how it has evolved over time. Yeah, gotta love drugging up the next generation to fight your semi-pointless war. Semi-pointless, yeah, I guess it is semi-pointless. The wars do make a handful of people extremely rich. As the Emperor wills it. Damn, Kira, that's dark. The Tau. Oh yeah, that's right. I just learned about them last night. Ganryuki says, make sure your babies can pray to the Emperor before their words are brother. They look dope though. Kind of funny how there's so little going on at work right now so that I can tune in for a bit. Alpharisus, if you don't mind sharing, what do you do at work? Yeah, it does beg the question why they even try against such insurmountable odds, right? But I guess the chaos gods and whatnot have their backs against a wall. Yeah, that's, I mean, even as I was saying it, I was like, well, shit. I mean, what does dying bring them, right? Like then their souls being sucked out or whatever. It was fucking crazy. Well, no, that was the what are they called? I was about to say necromancer, but like, no, the necroids. No, I'm thinking of the dead ones. That story was fucked up. But with Roboot Gilliman resurrected for the first time, there is a slimmer hope in the galaxy. Who's that? The Space Boy Scout. Kira, what's up, Checkerbecker? Max just has. I think I follow Chicago on YouTube since you guys moved to 3 recording studios. I think I follow Chicago on YouTube since you guys moved to 3 recording studios. This is the second actual studio that we've been in as a company. Love whoever those war babes were. The big table. Necrons. Yeah, Necrons. They're not undead, kind of, maybe. Yeah. All right, cool. Here we go.
Combinations of preset unit stats. There may or may not be a mission for one side to achieve, and these games can be highly strict or open to player interpretations. Players will usually paint their miniature soldiers for use on the battlefield, and these can be in a variety of factional designs and colours. Some people prefer their involvement in 40k to be focused entirely on this hobby of painting, designing and modifying these miniature units, and this part of 40k can be just as all-consuming as the lore or the tabletop. Some may choose to split their time between each part, or devote all their hobby time to one piece of the whole 40k hobby, be that the lore, tabletop, or the painting designing element.
Each their own.
Now comes the challenge for me, summarizing 40k. So Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, a future beset by galactic war from a skirmishing city turf war level through to planetary conquest and system-wide campaigns fought through its space and planets. It is far more pessimistic than most other deep lore universes, and also regularly borders on what you would describe as space horror. Now 40k is primarily focused around humanity, which has through many thousands of years achieved an unimaginable level of technology, and then lost the majority of this zenith through a devastating war. Humanity after this ancient war was left broken and fragmented across the galaxy. It would be later reunified by one godlike individual known as the Emperor of Man, and he would set in motion the new order for mankind known as the Imperium of Man. But a devastating civil war known as the Horus Heresy would befall mankind before the Emperor could complete his goals for humanity, and he would instead now become a living corpse enshrined on Earth or Terra. Humanity would become shattered by this civil war, and after a slow, painful recovery, it has become for the longest time a stagnant civilization. Suffocating under its own bureaucracy, the Imperium has begun making the smallest steps toward advancement in the most recent days of its history, but it still stands as a strange juxtaposition of ancient tech that is beyond the comprehension of many of its citizens. It is a weak and precarious civilization, simultaneously able to wield immense military power. Humanity itself, through thousands of years of conflict with alien races who are more often than not excessively hostile, has become a highly xenophobic race. It views almost all other races as needing to be exterminated and has almost no morals or ethics as to how this is to be achieved. The galaxy-spanning empire of humanity is essentially a totalitarian state that worships the Emperor of Man. The Imperium of Man has large, if not complete, control over its citizens, including many aspects of their lives, economy, social life, education, private lives, science, and indoctrination into its ideology. Any who are not seen to be a follower of the Emperor may and will be persecuted as heretics, and this is often largely open to interpretation and leads to large-scale abuses of power and executions. The Imperium uses this deeply entrenched worship and imperial ideology to control and mobilize mass populations of its citizenry for its armies like the Imperial Guard and Imperial Fleet. It also will utilize its citizens to fulfill whatever role is needed. These roles can, and often are, fairly unpleasant, especially when the rule of law is often severe and absolute. Humanity also wields in its arsenal the Emperor's greatest gift, the military sledgehammer known as the Imperial Astartes. These are the iconic Space Marines, genetically enhanced superhuman warriors who represent the pinnacle of human modification and military power.
Okay, so they're genetically modified to be advanced. Okay, so for whatever reason, my brain makes up all kinds of things, right? But for whatever reason, I was thinking that the Space Marines were humans, like inside of those like big machine suits, but they are actually genetically modified humans. Okay, that was a misconception that I had. You actually can receive a malus? PDC Wolf, what is a MALUS? A malus? A malice? For fielding an unpainted army. Not sure if that's still in the rule book. For fielding an unpainted army. That's kind of funny. Not sure if that's still in the rule book, but it was hilarious. That's pretty funny. And Max, I want to put that up. I'll just have to come back to it. Necron lore vid by the Templin Institute. They've essentially bastardized the concept of a world government into a theocracy. Yeah. I think they often overlook one important point. Since the warp and thus chaos gods feed off of emotions and such, the Empire's citizens are kind of forced to keep their minds to worship. Otherwise, they open the door to chaos. God, it's so fucking cool. I really want to click on these linky boos here, but I don't want to give away what we're going to be watching. So let me show a closer look of my face here while I do that. Make sure it doesn't play right away. And then get these loaded up because I hate scrolling back up. Is the opposite of bonus. Got it. Okay. Right on.
Their forces have...
Hold on. Chill. At a bakery. Oh, okay. Right on. 2 hearts and some other additional organ. They're 9 feet tall on average and weigh over 500 pounds if memory serves. 2 hearts and 3 lungs. Space Marines are 7'5". That explains a lot. So that's why they're so willingly subservient and put up with being treated like such crap. The Strayus thought can power up their enemies. Yeah. Cool. Okay, great. Here we go. Oh, ball sacks. Doesn't just work.
Access to some of the most powerful weapons and force multipliers humanity wields. Much of this tech is ancient and requires careful care and repair by specialists dedicated to retaining this critical knowledge. But as powerful as humanity is, even with its small progression in its most recent times, it still stands on the edge of annihilation by various alien races or entities.
I imagine
Humanity
so.
somehow has survived to this point despite being on an almost permanent risk of complete destruction and forced extinction. Within the lore, this has nearly happened on multiple occasions, and what is left of humanity now in the Imperium of Man are the remnants of those survivors, a highly ignorant, fearful people in a fairly constant state of decay where critical technological information is often lost. The Imperium and humanity's primary goals are to locate lost technology from the zenith period of mankind, known as the Dark Age of Technology, otherwise referred to as the Golden Age. It also focuses upon the continued defense and expansion of its territories, and of course the extermination of all alien races, known collectively as the Xenos.
The Xenos. Okay.
Because humanity has become so violently and ignorantly xenophobic in the far future, it also has no qualms about committing planetary levels of genocide. If you're not human and don't worship the Emperor, then you are the enemy, a heretic, and must be exterminated.
So a lot of the other factions are terrifying, and they feed off of the complete pain and suffering or fear of like other beings. And so that's why they do the war, from what I'm understanding of all of this, right? So what is the issue with the xenophobia of the Imperium of Man in that case? Is what Luton, or whatever the creator here's name is, suggesting is that there are Xenos who, I mean, I guess the Tau is kind of peaceful, but isn't it just safer to just kill everything? I mean, okay, so because I don't have a vision of the Xenos in any kind of real way being peaceful. That's all I'm saying.
Diplomacy is almost not a thing for the Imperium, and the usual recourse is to just shoot on sight. In fairness though, there was a time where humanity had attempted a more diplomatic approach, but this over—
Look at those kitties! That's why my daughter, every time we turn a book and there's a cat, always points out the cat, because look at me. I'm like, look at, there's cats!
time has just disintegrated, with most of its contact with aliens resulting in some kind of conflict. It now simply believes all other life must be extinguished, or at the very least dominated and enslaved for work or experimentation. These cases are usually quite rare. There are 6 other races that are seen as the enemies of humanity. Any of these factions can be played by you within the tabletop game of 40k, or models for collecting and painting.
Orcs are
Some players
fucking
will dedicate
cool.
themselves entirely to one faction, building it up, fleshing it out to the limit of their model making ability, and others may have multiple armies of different factions.
Wow. God, that's beautiful.
The Necrons are a very ancient race, strange creatures that—
Before we get into the details of the Necrons, I'm going to get over here and get present to all of you. All right. So the entire Horus heresy can kind of cheesily be traced to a single stray thought opening the door to chaos in the mind of a space marine. Ah, okay. I only know like very superficially the Horus heresy, but okay. That's interesting. Alpha Legion are almost 8 feet, which makes them as tall as their Primarch, says Alpharisis. So, Redeemer, you say, God, this future existence seems like such an anti-America. It feels so natural to hate the thought of this happening that I'm hating it without even thinking about it. Well, and largely what I was also getting from the commentary on the YouTube channel is that there are humans who don't see a day of war in the world of 40k. But what are their lives like? Are they still like slaves? Do they still have shitty lives anyway? They're still completely what's the word I'm looking for? Where they're just like, I hate it when I can't think of a word that I freaking know. Just like hit with propaganda, right? It starts with a D. It's safer to kill everything. Kira 2022. Yeah. That's a very unlikely quote to come from me, but you got the receipts now. It's right here. It's right here on Twitch. The Empire has collaborated in the past with alien races, but only as an absolute last resort. But otherwise, they manifest destiny. Also, out of all the other factions, maybe 2 could be friendly. Yes and no. It should never be safer to commit wars you don't have to, but it helps that a majority of other races are not particularly friendly. Yeah, it's easy to just like assume that they're not going to be friendly. It varies from planet to planet. If you're referring to civilians, then we got a glimpse from that with the animation on their schools, Kira. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's continue. Here come the Necrons.
that appear like metallic skeletons. They're actually formed of living metal. They span the galaxy and are in a continuing state of awakening from their tombs after many thousands of years of sleep. They seek to rebuild their empire and dominate the galaxy. One of their key abilities is that of reanimation. They can reassemble themselves after death and fight on. They're also generally mindless automatons.
Wow.
How this came to be is another story. Now, Games Workshop has seen fit to recently rename some of its units, largely it seems for legal reasons, but since forever this faction has been known as the Eldar. More recently it is known as the Eldari.
I thought that
basically it's the Eldar. These are derived from the elves of many more fantasy games and are basically space elves. Despite this quite simplistic analogy, the Eldar have a rich and tragic lore because...
See, I think that if I was painting figurines, I would go with Eldar to paint. Look at how beautiful these costumes are.
Of past disasters that have left the Eldar with no homeworlds to speak of.
I like things that are pretty. I like things that are very pretty.
They now travel the galaxy in vast ships known as craft worlds. The Eldar wield powerful weapons, but are generally physically weak, and they also have immense arrogance towards other races. Their defining feature, and to some degree their biggest flaw, is that the Eldar are very powerful when it comes to psykers and psychic abilities drawn from the warp. The Dark Eldar are essentially space pirates who live lives of excess and sadistic torture porn. Anyone who looks like they're about to be captured by the Dark Eldar is rarely something that you would want to contemplate, and suicide would generally be significantly preferable. A faction of many faces and contradicting goals, Chaos is as its name describes, and it originates from the parallel dimension known as the Warp. And this dimension is a reactive plane of existence that absorbs the most powerful emotions and desires of mortal creatures.
I think the Warp is so cool!
The reactive Imperium would lead to the birth of entities of godlike power, the Chaos Gods. They each focus on specific mortal desires. Khorne is the god of blood, representing war, rage, and hatred. Tzeentch is the Changer, representing ambition, scheming, conspiracy, and sorcery. Nurgle is the plague god, representing mortality, morbidity, and despair. And Slaanesh is the god of lust, greed, excess, pleasure, pain, and perfection. The continuing desires and emotions of the galaxy's inhabitants sustain these entities. However, they also reach out into the mortal realm through their manifested entities made from the warp known as demons. And these hellish creatures are enough to send ordinary citizens insane on sight. They're backed by traitors to the Imperium, the corrupted Chaos Space Marines. The gods of chaos and their agents can also infect the minds of mortals, and often cults and worshippers may spring up on planets across the Imperium. This is again one reason why the Imperium of Man is so ruthless about purging heretics. While chaos itself in the material world appears as one enemy that simply wages war, it is in fact in an internal conflict within itself. Each of the Chaos Gods fights for domination over the others, and this occupies the majority of their focus and energy. Each god's ultimate goal is complete domination of the Imperium, a goal which seems unattainable and dangerous to their own existence were it to come to pass. Chaos is one of the most varied and pervasive forces in 40k and has many forces operating under its banner, some dedicated to a specific god, others that simply worship chaos undivided.
I love the Chaos Gods. Very cool. Second best aliens, in my opinion. The Necrons, is that who you're talking about, G. Puckcraft? Okay, also, ordinary baseline Space Marines don't give a fuck about their fellow humans and will easily and quickly murder them with little reason. Yeah, I love that female Eldar's design. Oh, it's so beautiful. The normal Eldar are so fun. Easily the best alien. That's who you're talking about. Okay, cool. Yeah, so pretty. Not without reason, but they will at the slimmest sign of heresy or corruption. It's a more murdery, rapery, upside down world. It makes me wonder if a chaos god could be formed based off of a purely good desires and ideals. Actually, Redeemer, in our Chicago Reacts video, when we were watching Bricky's introduction to all the factions, Kit and I got into that conversation. I was like, well, if they, because if they represent one side of something, there's the duality, right? There's the other side, because without one, there isn't the other. And Kit said that is also present, but from what I'm understanding is that they feed off of the emotions and the thoughts of, I don't know if it's just humanity or beings in general. I think it's just beings, because a bunch of the Eldar, like those clown ones and the other ones, the like sicko ones, I think that they have a connection with one of the Chaos Gods. I think Slanesh for the fucking torture ones. This is how I remember things, you guys. Bear with me. I'm just learning about all of this. But yeah, so since they're feeding off of the thoughts and emotions of other beings, and we're in a world of war, I guess the way that they would show up is, you know, shit in, shit out, right? I don't know how to say this eloquently, right? So there you go. That's kind of how I read it personally. The Tau are so brainwashed, they're actually immune to the influence of the warp. Wow. They live under a sort of greater good ideal. So they're Pollyannas too. That'd be something else. Personally, I think the Gene Stealer cults are the best. Ooh, I can't wait to learn about them. They kind of confused me a little bit, Max. So actually, how about after this, we'll look at Gene Stealers? Because I know you already sent me a video of that. If the Tau were so strong in their beliefs, they formed their own good. I bet that turned the tide of the battle and then some. The Chaos Gods are super interesting. I just think they're like, there's something about, I think that was really the thing that when I was going through these factions with Bricky's video, because again, Kit's been talking to me about 40k for a long time. He hasn't been talking to me about it, but he's been talking about it in front of me and to me for a while. And I think when we were watching the factions video from Bricky and he got into the Chaos Gods, that's when I was like, oh shit. Now that's something I'm curious about, right? And then all of these other like incredible like stories came out of these factions and how they're all intertwined and all the shit. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. So let's go ahead. Oh, the Orks. I just learned about them last night too.
Now everybody knows the Orks, right? Middle-earth and all that crap. Not these Orks. These are more Mad Max Fury Road crossed with British football hooligans, and then you're in the right ballpark. Also in space. Space Orks are likely a genetically designed species focused for hyper-violence and to be almost impossible to permanently exterminate. They are as hilarious as they are dangerous, and their entire society focuses around casual violence. The Orks, though, are also probably the most sunny and optimistic of all races, strangely. Their genetic disposition sets them to see things as generally good and enjoyable, especially when it comes to fighting. And they never really see failure as a negative, because it means you just get to have another go later. They also operate more on instinct by design than learned knowledge, and their willpower becomes more powerful the more Orks are present, meaning when they are collected en masse, they can literally will things to be true by collective belief. They also have a strange ability to just cobble together vehicles and weapons from scrap. They also have no real governing structure. Leaders are chosen by progressively being better at smashing their rivals' heads in, until an Ork eventually reaches the position of being a war boss. When Orks collect in huge numbers, they may launch a massive campaign of raiding and attacking anything that's not Ork by launching a warg, essentially a huge, no-holds-barred slaughter fest. Anything in the way, best dig in or get the hell out. The Tau are one of the newer races and are fast learning that the galaxy is not a friendly place. The Tau operate similarly to the Orks on a more optimistic level, but that's about as far as their common ground with the Orks goes, because the Tau exist on the fringe of the Imperium and are unusual as they actively encourage other races to join their cause. They collectively follow an ideology known as the greater good. This is their guiding principle that working together is better than working against one another, as this leads to a stronger, more peaceful society. However, anybody who disagrees with this best prepare for war. To be fair though, the Tau do usually attempt significant levels of diplomacy before declaring their target a lost cause. Their military is largely focused around technology and ranged combat, something often mocked and derided by their enemies. The Tau themselves are comparatively weak and use other races absorbed into their faction to fight in close quarters.
So if you're a tabletop player and you choose the Tau, does that mean that in general you get to use more figurines from the other factions? I love how I'm just like, oh, the figurines are cool. Like, I want to paint those little figurines. Because, yeah, if they bring other people into the fold, that would mean that they get to use them and use their strengths and powers. That would be the way that I would read that. La 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 la. The Tower, so brainwashed are actually immune to the influence. Yep, okay. Read that. Okay. The coolest thing about them is they really are duality. Example, Khorne loves murder and slaughter, but he also respects honor and bravery at the same time. I would also guess that Khorne would love birth and regeneration. Because I feel like that's the other side of death, right? Is like birth or rebirth, which is also traumatic and painful. I mean, think about childbirth. I mean, I gave birth to a child and I almost died. So, I mean, it feels like the same thing, right? So if you think of like, I don't really know ancient gods and goddesses that well, but from what I understand is like you think of Kali, the goddess of death and destruction, but also like creation, like out of death and destruction comes creation. So there's like this duality inside of just an idea or a way of being. If anyone is brainwashed in the Imperium of Man, heaven forbid, the only truly strongly moral race have good intentions. I'm gonna have to go in like half an hour. So after this, can we watch the Gene Stealer? Yeah, I got you, Max. Yep, totally. There's no good guys in 40k. The Tau hold gulags, and whoever they take as refugee is brainwashed into a caste to serve their entire lives. If the Orks weren't so stupid, like not as in a dumb faction, but they're actively very stupid, they could easily conquer the galaxy. For sure. The way they're able to manifest anything they want, that's insane to me. I love it, and that's insane. If the Orks were smarter, they'd be less dangerous because of their collective emotional stuff. The only good guys in 40k are the Farsight Enclaves, a group of the Tau that split away from the Empire as a whole. They're rather very good. The Orks are the most powerful faction. It's just that their intelligence doesn't allow them to realize that, thankfully. The Orks have such intensely powerful imaginations that they can force things to happen despite all known laws of physics. The Tau do have a couple of non-Tau units in the tabletop, mostly the Kroot. Kira, Google Mortarion's model for the Death Guard. It's so dope. I got to write that down. Because otherwise I won't. Mortarion's model. Got it. Cool. I'll take a look because those tabletop figurines look real fucking cool. Well, you can with guardsmen as a separate division if you paint them up as a thing called Juvesa or human helpers, mostly former guardsmen that turned away from the Imperium. That's the other side of Nurgle, I believe. Nurgle is the god of decay and disease. Okay, got it. Okay, PDC Wolf, thanks for the correction. I appreciate that. Hi, Kira. I'm from Vietnam. What's up, barkeep? Welcome to the stream. Ugh, these guys are terrifying. Let's continue.
Tyranids are an unusual exception to all previous Xenos. They do not operate on an ideology, a political structure, or debatably a single leader. They are the most Xenos of Xenos and have begun a steady invasion of the galaxy. They are presumed to have arrived from beyond the borders of the known galaxy and are hostile in the extreme. They do not wield any technology as we would understand it, or their ships, forces and weapons are biological in origin. Tyranids are one of the most nightmarish factions within 40k.
I'm learning about the Tyranids, and you sneak up on me like that. You can't do that shit, man.
Aren't they terrifying?
Yeah, I mean, I learned about them like last night on the Bricky video, but I'm going over somebody in our Chicago Reacts comment thread recommended this guy, and so I just started with his introductory video because I figured that was probably the best way to go. So, so it's kind of a review. I'm kind of impressed by how much I remember of this shit. I was just like, wow, my mind kind of remembered a lot of this, which means I was actually interested.
I think I snuck in at the perfect time then.
All right. Here we go.
40k, their singular goal is biomass, that is to strip planets of all biological and mineral materials, leaving them barren, dead husks. They assault planets with extreme prejudice and will not cease their assault unless they are damaged to a point where their acquisition of biomass becomes negative to that being expended. They use all material to birth their forces on their vast bioships and recycle their own units by dissolving them back into the pool of biomass, which then they draw to create anything else they may need. They absorb the
disastrous. All of this is disastrous.
Genetics of all that they encounter and use this to evolve and create more hostile and efficient creatures and biomachines to achieve their goal. They may also seed and infect planets ahead of time to often use the planet's own inhabitants against themselves when the Tyranids arrive to destroy the world. The Tyranids are controlled en masse by something called the hive mind. This is essentially a broadcasted collective consciousness that enables them the powerful skill of being able to operate as one, but made up of millions of individual entities across a planet. The Tyranids are horrific, seemingly unstoppable, and have already wrought terrible destruction upon many others across the galaxy. Many rumour that their already devastating campaigns are only the initial scouting parties to the Milky Way galaxy, and if this is true, the Tyranids could be the ones to end everything.
That's what I'm gathering, and I think that that's what's going to happen, if you want my opinion. The Tyranids are terrifying. The end is never the end, 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 says Barkeep. The Tyranids are an amazing concept. Ships, Kira, imagine riding in a living ship. For the Zerg from StarCraft. That's also what was mentioned last night when we were reading it. Also, my finger is now broken. Are you familiar with the Library of Babylon? It's an insane website that proves that nothing will ever truly be original because you can literally find any possible thing you can type or write already in there. No, I have not heard of the Library of Babylon. Really? Okay, this is my look up. Library of Babylon. Okay. I'll check that out too. They're such a boring faction to me. Like, they're cool, but they're just kind of lame. I like the actual sentient races. Yeah, me too. Well, plus, yeah. Yeah, you know, because it's not like I'm not into the races that just love to be at war or just love torturing or, you know, I think they're rad, but the Tyranids, I don't have an emotional connection to them other than disgust, which is not enough. I said a line in the Stanley Parable where the narrator is on a madness mantra. Oh, okay. I got it. All right, here we go.
While not wanting to touch on the
subject
of psychic power too strongly in this video, many factions in 40k feature what are known as psykers. These are essentially individuals who can wield what you might describe in other universes as magic powers. Some factions have strong psych.
Max, I know that you said you had to be leaving in a half hour, which is probably now 20 minutes from now. We'll get through this next 5 minutes. I'm going to go straight to the Gene Stealers.
And others have none, and these powers are drawn from the parallel dimension known as the Warp or the Imperium. Individuals who can use these powers do so at considerable risk, as the Warp is an unstable and dangerous realm. The relationship between real space and warp space is a complicated one and can affect many aspects of life in the far future, but this is something best covered in another video. The takeaway for you today is that Warhammer 40,000 is a world of vast-scale warfare and complex interfactional and internal factional power struggles. 40k is by its very nature often absurd to the extreme. Sometimes this can be somewhat detrimental to its own narrative, because when everything is supersized and extreme in the extreme, suddenly everything looks kind of the same, and then it becomes arguably less impressive. However, 40k just owns its own absurdity, and it's something that you just have to roll with.
And I think that's why it's. Oh, I said we'd just get straight through this, but that's why I think it was so hard for me. Pardon me, I'm drinking soda. For me to glom on to the whole world, because I'd look at a scene like this and I'd be like, I'm not interested in that.
Suspend your disbelief. For many who are obsessed with 40k, the hyper-violent, xenophobic, genocidal nature of its occupants is largely a source for much dark humour. Most people that are into Warhammer, they don't take it too seriously, but it is also fun to take things in 40k very seriously, because it contains so much detail. But simultaneously, there are many memes and pure nonsensical comedy that comes from 40k because of just how extreme it is. The classic It Sounds Like Heresy being one such example, whereby anyone who dissents from the official line of thinking is declared a heretic and executed on the spot. It's one that I enjoy using all the time in the comments. And the key theme of 40k is purely about war. The lore is a vast, all-encompassing backdrop that stands on its own, but 40k for itself is all about the galactic wars that are unending. It's focused this way because it represents the background for a tabletop war game that is surprisingly about factional war. 40k itself operates on a fairly healthy dose of irony. Much of the events and organizations, forces and individuals often are the result of half-truths or pure indoctrination, and some of those that are held up as heroes are not what they appear to be, and as usual the context of events are very important, but many things can end up being actually quite subjective. The fact that the Imperium itself has, through its devout worship of the Emperor, now has its state religion embedded in almost everything it does, which is hilarious when you consider the Emperor of Man set out to eradicate religion from humanity entirely. Warhammer 40k draws from a lot of historical events and ideologies. It also borrows heavily from other settings like Dune, 2000 AD, Lovecraftian influence, obviously Tolkien, and even older texts like Milton's Paradise Lost and the Divine Comedy with Dante and the Inferno. 40k has continued to be fleshed out over time, and it shows no signs of abating. If anything, it's moving forward at a faster pace than ever. It is a universe that has consumed me for some 30 years, and I highly recommend that you allow the darkness of the far future to enter your life. You may live to regret it, but you will undoubtedly enjoy it. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, if you have a suggestion for what my next 40k primer should be, tell me in the comments. If you want to learn more about Warhammer 40,000, check out the video on the end screen to the left, or my collected playlist of content to the right.
Okay. So that was very interesting. Yeah, very surprising, some of that. Really still loving the chaos, the warp and chaos. Are okay. So we're gonna get a little bit more into detail around Gene Stealers, because first of all, Max sent over the video and they're leaving soon, so I want to make sure that that they at least get to see a little bit of what they sent over. You can't have a good story about Tyranid Hormagaunt number 778 getting cut down by a gun line. And Tyranids are interesting because they aren't sentient, of which they have plenty as is. It's interesting to explore something that's primal. Whoa, who's she? Who's who? No. If you want a really good story, I think you saw Daniel come in. Daniel is he's actually the owner of the studio we're in. And he snuck up on me and scared the crap out of me. If you want a really good story revolving chaos, I highly recommend the Dab War. It has so many awesome chapters of space marines going at each other. Was that a skinless bondage warrior girl? I was probably looking straight at it, but I missed what you're talking about. A Sister of Battle, Repentia. I know. I'm gonna watch a Sisters of Battle video in just a little bit. Hey, Abyss Keeper, what's up? Are the militant arm of the church? Yep. I heard about them last night, so I want to learn more about them. But they're awesome. Barkeep, you are recommending a video, and we will put that on the queue.